Hey there, welcome to the REI Conversion Podcast, where each episode we discuss strategies and digital tools to help you launch, automate, and scale your real estate investing business. Learn how to run your investing business remotely, find out ways to automate your business to better utilize your time, and learn what other successful investors are implementing so you can get to the next step closer to your investing goals. And I'm your host and founder of REI Conversion, Jesse Kwong. This episode of REI Conversion Podcast is brought to you by Pebble, a simple and powerful app that allows you to automate and track your entire land investing. It's an app that simply allows you to centralize and streamline your entire deal flow for land investing, with features like our automated mailing system that sends out offers in smaller batches to steady out incoming seller leads, to our documents generator allowing you to generate letters, contracts, and deeds in seconds, and the ability to track and route all of your buyer and seller leads to a central place inside of Pebble. And not to mention full Zapier and REI conversion website integrations. You get back time to scale and build out your processes. With no setup fees, no setup time, simply create your free account today and get your first mailer out the door with Pebble in minutes. Head over to pebblerei.com, that's PEBBLEREI.com to start your free trial today. Hey, how's it going? It's Jesse here from the REI Conversion Podcast. Today, I've got another guest here with me. His name is Joe Schmitt. I've known him. I've seen him around, very active in a lot of communities in the land investing community. He's probably someone that you've seen around in a lot of groups inside of Facebook as well. He's been a huge help for a lot of other investors that are in the industry or getting into it. And I'm really honored to have him here on the show today. Now, he's also active inside our Facebook group. Now, if you haven't joined our group, make sure you join the Land Investing Community by REI Conversion Facebook group. That's facebook.com/groups/REI Conversion. And today we're going to be talking to him all about hiring out for your due diligence. I recently posted up something in our Facebook group, and many of you commented, and you do have a VA that does the due diligence process. And I wanted to see what sort of other options out there. I know there are the common services that a lot of people use, a lot of differentiating opinions on that, but I wanted to pick somebody's brain that is actually doing this on the regular and get their sort of input on this. So I'm going to bring Joe on here. Hey, Joe, how's it going?
Hey, Jesse. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you on the show. I know, like I was just saying earlier, that I think I'm going to thank the community is going to thank you for all that you help and the advice that you give inside the group. So we really appreciate all the contribution you've put inside the different communities that you're part of. So Joe, let's jump right into this. I try to keep these podcasts to the point and right to it. But Joe, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and, just sum up sort of your land investing journey so far?
Sure. So I've been always been interested in real estate. I've probably been land investing for it's going on close to 3 years now.
Yeah.
And, have done probably close to 50 deals at this point, and hoping to make the leap to full time at some point in the near future. Probably another year or two away, but steady progress.
Yeah. And let's jump right into this. Let's talk about your due diligence process and how you go about that. Now, before you even hired a VA, I'm assuming you were doing this all by yourself first. Is that correct?
Yep, I was.
Yeah, and would you say, before, let's say a new investor gets in to land investing, there a lot of people are very excited to scale and automate and do all sorts of different things. I would assume you would say they would need to get their feet wet and understand that due diligence process themselves first, right?
For sure.
Is there something, in terms of somebody who's just getting into land investing, is there sort of, what would you suggest for someone who has to do it themselves first?
Have a list or some kind of a process, Excel spreadsheet, and to make sure that you're following it every time for every property.
Yeah. Is there one thing or a couple of things that you would say a lot of people tend to miss at the start that might trip them up, that they might not have known about, that you can only learn through experience? Is there anything that they should be looking out for? in specific?
I bought land in a canyon once that had no great way of accessing. So
So
didn't
access,
I didn't
access.
have to make that mistake twice to learn that I should start checking topography and that I should do a good job of checking access.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I think my biggest learning lesson was I didn't know one of my properties was just it looked like a 747 just crash landed on there, but it didn't look like anything on Google Maps. So that make sure you have eyes on the property.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, that was a hard learning lesson. I think I've talked about that a few times, but it was not a pretty one. But anyways, so why and when did you decide it was time to hire a VA or an assistant or somebody to get involved with your due diligence process?
Sure. So the first person that I hired was my wife, and it was then that I got really serious about it, because it's one thing to kind of do things yourself, but to make sure that someone else is doing things the way that you'd like them done, then I really had to double down on the structure that I put around it. So we got a pretty comprehensive spreadsheet together for the initial intake, first pass, and then in-depth comps that we do on all the properties that we get.
Yeah.
And after she got sick of doing that, we decided it was time to hire it out and bring someone in to do it, because our deal flow was amping up.
Yeah. It's always it's nice to be able to work with a partner like a wife or whoever that you're close with, and they can understand, and not, sometimes it's not something that they want to do at the end of the day, but it also gets you in the mindset of training somebody and learning how to hold somebody's hand through the process, and it gives you sort of insight into how you can sort of train a VA. So after you worked with your wife, you went and gone ahead and outsourced somebody in. Do you mind me asking, where were you looking for your VAs?
Sure. I did some looking on Upwork, and I did hire a marketing VA off of Upwork,
Yeah.
and I trained her myself to do the marketing. But for intake, my overall goal was to have my intake person and due diligence person eventually wind up handling the whole intake process. So I stuck to someone onshore, and I used Hire My Mom to
Oh
find
yeah.
people to be candidates for the position.
Yeah, you know what? This is the second time we just launched an episode today, and somebody else had found huge success on is it Hire My Mom? Yeah.
HireMyMom.com.
I never even heard about this site before, and it seems like there's quite a bit of success in that website. So I'll make sure to include that in the show notes. But we had somebody by the name of Amy, and she hired her marketing assistant, who's gotten involved with a lot of the entire process through Hire My Mom. And it sounds like and you're still working with that person?
Yeah, matter of fact, we just had a conversation about being promoted to intake manager today.
Wow, that's awesome. You having seen both Upwork and Hire My Mom, I'm interested to know, what differences do you see between the two?
I found a more mature candidate pool in Hire My Mom. A lot of people who were looking for opportunities to have a side hustle or to make some money outside of a corporate job, in addition to people who were just had a lot of good professional experience, but have little kids at home and wanted to
Sure.
make some money but can't be in the workforce full time.
And everybody on Hire My Mom, are they onshore, or are they also overseas as well, or?
Everyone who applied to the position that I had was onshore. If they
Okay,
have an offshore way of doing things, I haven't seen that.
okay, that's really interesting. It's something I'm definitely going to check out now that you're the second guest here that has talked about that site. Now, let's come back to due diligence. Can you sort of give us a rundown for what your VA checks for when they're doing the due diligence, or how do you structure everything?
Sure. So when someone comes in, if we've got a potential motivated seller, my VA will look it up on my mailing list by the reference number, and then create a row in our spreadsheet for it,
Mm.
and just do like a basic sanity check of the thing. Is there access? Is it flat or gently rolling? Is it not the side of a cliff?
Is it in
Is
a canyon?
Yeah, right. Um, is it wetlands? Is it in a flood zone where there's nothing else around it?
Gotcha.
And I mean, that's basically the first test. If it passes all of that stuff, she's entirely on her own on that, then the next step is to do some comps on the property.
Now, if they're doing comps, you must be doing neutral letters that are going out then.
No,
Oh no,
not
sorry. No.
necessarily.
Yeah, right. Okay. Right. Sorry, I take that back. Okay. So they're doing comps on the property. Um, and that's, I'm assuming to figure out, what your price point is going to be for that property. Is that what it is
Hmm.
for? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So they're doing that first initial check. It passes. What goes on next? Do they notify you? Do they go on to the next stage? Does that summary get sent to you? You review?
Um, if it passes all the tests and once comps are done, then I take a look at it. And if it kind of passes the sniff test to me, then I'll talk to the seller. Sometimes I'll dig into one of the comps that she's done.
Okay.
I ask her to put all the links for where she found the comps
Mm.
in there. And once I've got the feel for a county, I generally don't have to second guess her too much. But there's always some times where things are a little bit off, and we just have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
But
And then,
yeah, generally I'll have a conversation with the seller after she's done her stuff.
and then after that, what's the next step in terms of your due diligence? So you've done the sort of the sanity check. You've now negotiated you've had a chat with the seller. I'm assuming you run them through you probably run it through a more rigorous due diligence process.
So yeah, after that, if I've agreed with a seller on a price, then I'll bring it to someone else that is not an in-house VA, but someone who does a due diligence service, who's like an abstractor.
Yep.
And she will do all of the in-depth things like figuring out the zoning with the county, understanding if there's any liens, doing a chain of title search, all the stuff that I don't know how to do. Honestly, I was not doing that prior to hiring this out,
Yeah.
and I could never do as good a job as my in-depth due diligence VA does.
Yeah. Okay, got you. So at that point, let's say you pick something up on that second, more in-depth due diligence process. If something sort of is a red flag, do you go back to your seller and renegotiate? Do you drop it? Typically, obviously the situation, it depends. But what typically happens for you?
If there's back taxes or if there's a lien or especially if there's a problem on the chain of title, then we'll go back and see if we can either get the challenge cleared up,
Yeah.
or maybe I'll try to negotiate for less. But oftentimes it winds up being a title thing, and we will wind up just parting ways on it because it'd be too much work for the amount that I want to pay to get it taken care of.
Sure. Now you're more in depth, so it sounds like you've got two people involved with the due diligence process. The second person that gets involved, the more of an abstractor that gets involved, they sort of send you a summary, or how does that work? And then do you review that as well?
Yep, they send me a summary spreadsheet that has a lot of stuff figured out. What it's zoned for, is it an HOA, the complete legal description, GPS coordinates, lots of stuff. And then they also...
Anything in particular you look out for on that sort of due diligence part of things?
I usually have a good feel for what is pertinent there.
Yeah.
If there's any back taxes due, that's a great thing to know, because it means they're probably pretty darn motivated.
Yeah. Exactly. For those of you guys that are listening, Joe has been really generous, and he's actually shared with us his sort of two processes. So he's got the Google Sheets, and there's sort of some logic built into it that you can see how he uses it. You can take that and use it as your own if you'd like. Um, Now, I think it's going to be a Google Sheet. Now, we're probably going to figure this out, and we're recording this a little bit earlier, and we're going to figure the download out afterwards. And I'll also give a screenshot of what Joe gets provided with from the second person that gets involved with the due diligence process. So again, it's sort of a two-step. Would you say it's more of a two-step process for you when it comes to due diligence then?
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Yeah. Now, what would you say are the most challenging parts or steps about due diligence with a VA versus obviously doing it yourself?
The hardest part is providing feedback. There's a trust but verify. So if something doesn't seem right, or there have been situations where I kind of trusted the price and I felt good about it, and then when I got a little further into the next part of due diligence, or I just dug into something a little bit more on my own, I was like, oh, we were off here.
Yeah.
And so providing that feedback in a gentle way is really important.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes just easier, like, oh, you know what, I'm just whatever, I'll do it myself this time around. And you sort of, I mean, this is speaking from my own experience. Sometimes it's just kind of like, you know what, this is probably a one-time thing. I don't need to provide feedback, and I regret later, because these things, you'll start seeing patterns of where sort of the holes are, and you got to go back and do provide feedback for them. So when you're providing feedback for them, I'm assuming you're doing a screen share or jumping onto chat and sort of hand holding them through that process of where you sort of dug a little bit further.
I usually don't go that in depth, but I'll just provide an explanation of what I found, and just say, hey, this is just a learning opportunity, and I made mistakes when I was looking at it, and I still make mistakes too. So, just have a candid and respectful dialogue about it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, when someone's hiring a VA to do their due diligence, what would you suggest for them to look for when, during that hiring process?
So my full-time job is I work with a lot of organizations on big software projects, and I always, tell clients that you're going to get out of this what you put into it. And I put a lot into hiring the intake manager that I have, and so I tested about half a dozen of the applicants that I got from Hire My Mom. So I actually gave them the due diligence spreadsheet that I use, and I gave them a really exhaustive Word document of this is exactly how you do comps. And then I took some properties that I had already due diligenced, and I said, here's half a dozen properties, comp them. Gotcha. And that knocked out about 3 people right there. And then the other 3 that did it, the one who returned really good comps was just like head and shoulders above everyone else. So I feel very fortunate. And I know that process document that I created, now that she's my intake manager and she may be getting too busy to handle everything from, intake all the way through acquisition, I can now reuse that process document for whoever else I decide to bring in if we get to that point.
Yeah. No, I like that hiring process. So you basically, I guess you hired a handful of VAs, and you got them to run through the same test, or you didn't even have to hire them to get them to go through the test?
No, that was part of the interview process. I'd talk to them and I'd say, if you want to take the next step, I'm going to give you a work sample to return to me, and we'll just see how it goes. And it's also a test for them to see if they really like the work, because most of the people that I'm talking to may know a little bit about, real estate, or have had a little bit of a house background, but they've definitely never done comps or run comps on vacant land.
For sure. So. And let me jump into this question. I know a lot of people are intrigued about this. Is how much does it typically run you to get an entire property properly due diligenced? Between the two VAs. I mean, you can break it down however you'd like. You can share as much as you'd like with this one. I know it's more of a sensitive question, but maybe on average, how much does it run you?
Sure. Um, Gosh, I started my intake VA off at $12 an hour for the first 90 days.
Yeah.
And then after she did a great job with that, I bumped her up to $15 an hour.
Yep.
And she can get a couple properties done, probably about 2 properties done in an hour, maybe 3 if she's working fast. I honestly don't try to time her or set a specific number on it. I trust the invoices that she sends me. It all seems pretty legit. And the abstractor that I have charges me about $50 or so per property, and she actually has our corporate cards, so she's able to order things from the county and get stuff off of DataTree if she needs to, or
Oh,
other
wow. Okay.
places to do comprehensive due diligence. So sometimes it gets as high as $75. It all depends on the information that she's got to gather, but it is well worth it.
Yeah. I found a pretty good abstractor on I think it was Fiverr, and yeah, I think it runs me around the same price as well. So um,
I'm glad I'm not overpaying.
yeah, right. All right, so we're looking at about 2 to 3 properties within the hour with your first intake manager, and then your abstractor about $50 to $75. In total, running you close to about $100 per property. Then
Yeah, that's about right.
sounds about right. Yeah. All right. Have you used any other services? I know there are other services like Landmasters, or I think there was just another one mentioned to me today. I forgot. But have you used any of those services to do your due diligence?
I haven't. I really wanted to kind of train someone to grow into what we're doing at my land business, so I decided I didn't want to go that route.
Yeah.
I hire out other stuff, but I didn't go any other places for due diligence.
Gotcha. Now, again, if somebody's thinking about hiring somebody to come in and do their due diligence, after how many properties would you say is a good time to start thinking about this? I mean, after how many properties they've sort of bought and sold and flipped, would you say it's probably a good time to start thinking about doing this because they have enough of insight into the business itself?
Oh, about 10 or so seems to be the right number. I think that's in the community, that's generally kind of agreed upon about the threshold for having a good degree of competence in land investing.
Yeah.
And that seems about right to me. I probably waited longer than I should have.
Gotcha. Well, Joe, thanks again for coming on and sharing your sort of due diligence process. Is there sort of anything that I missed here? Any sort of piece of advice you can give to others in general about due diligence or hiring out for due diligence? That's sort of a tricky one.
I would say to make sure that you've got a good structure that you trust yourself and that you feel comfortable handing off to someone else, and make sure that they understand how to do each individual piece of the process. And that a lot of people try to do video, and I've had much more success with providing someone a written document to reference than trying to make them scroll through a video to find out how to do things. Written documents, step by step, with screenshots, so that my 12-year-old son could do it.
That's something that we've heard back about our knowledge base, where I used to record a lot of videos as well, and I heard no, I prefer screenshots with clear outlines and arrows and whatnot over video. Now, video, I guess, is easier for us on our side, but this is not the first time I've heard of that. That's a great piece of advice in terms of sort of training a VA. Well, Joe, it's been a pleasure having you on this show. Thank you again. Now, if you guys are interested in downloading and getting access to what Joe's sharing here, we're going to have a link on the show notes. There's going to be an opt-in or just a form for you to enter in your name and email, and you'll get access to the library vault. And we'll have this inside of there as well. For those of you who are listening, let's see, the best way to, I totally forgot. I haven't, I'm trying to think, what is that resource? I believe, now I'm going to get in trouble here taking so much time to figure this out. I think it's reiconversion.com/resource dash, oh boy, library, I believe. Nope, it isn't. Well, you know what? I will record this part.
Whose show is this?
Yeah, it's been a while. I haven't recorded an episode for a month now, but we just got quite a bit stockpiled here. But anyways, I will have a link for you. You can find it on our podcast page if you go to reiconversion.com/podcast when you listen to this. Just look for the episode with Joe Schmitt talking about hiring a VA for a due diligence process, to handle your due diligence process. Joe, it's been a pleasure to have you on this show. Thank you for sharing that, all that you're continuing to share in the community, and thanks for the documents that you're going to be able to share with other land investors who are getting in, and obviously your words of advice for hiring a VA for due diligence. Thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure, Jesse. Thanks to you and for everything that you do for the land investing community.
Awesome. Cheers, and we'll talk again.
Yep. See ya.
Bye. Before you stop this podcast or head to the next episode, I want to personally thank you for listening to this episode of the REI Conversion Podcast. If you found this helpful, we'd greatly appreciate an awesome review and rating on whichever platform you're listening to this on. And if you have 2 minutes and wanted to step it up even more and help others, feel free to share this in other Facebook groups or pages or any communities, giving others a heads up of the REI Conversion Podcast or this specific episode that may help them on their investing journey. Once again, thanks very much for listening, and catch you on our next episode.